On August 31, 1997, Princess Diana of Wales was involved in a devastating car crash that tragically claimed her life. This accident became one of the most widely analyzed and controversial incidents of recent decades, prompting several official investigations aimed at determining exactly what happened that night. To better understand how that collision unfolded, and to reconstruct the full sequence of events, we carried out a technical reconstruction of the incident, examining the vehicle dynamics and the factors that ultimately led to the crash. The events began in the early hours of August 31st, when Diana as Princess Wales, Dodi Al Fayed and their bodyguard Trevor Rees-Jones left the Ritz Hotel in Paris in a Mercedes-Benz S. The Mercedes was a large luxury sedan, weighing roughly 4,000 pounds in its standard configuration. The version used for that trip also included additional structural reinforcements typical of security-spec vehicles, which slightly increased the car's overall mass. This detail was important from a vehicle dynamic standpoint. At speeds close to 65 miles per hour, a car of this weight carried several hundred kilojoules of kinetic energy that inevitably had to be dissipated during a collision with a fixed structure. The car was driven by Henri Paul, the hotel's head of security, on what was intended to be a short trip from Place Vendôme to a private apartment near the Champs-Élysées. However, from the very beginning of the journey, there was a factor that affected the drive. Several photographers followed the vehicle on motorcycles and in cars, trying to capture photographs of Dodi and Diana. In addition, the driver had a very high blood alcohol level. This condition produced several negative effects on driving performance, including increased reaction time and a reduced ability to accurately judge both distance and speed. The dynamic sequence began when the Mercedes entered the Pont de l'Alma tunnel, at a speed far above the legal limit of 30 miles per hour. The forensic estimates placed the speed before braking at about 66 miles per hour. At the moment of the main impact against the tunnel pillar, the dynamic reconstructions placed the speed at around 62 miles per hour. At a speed of 62 miles per hour, a vehicle travels approximately 91 feet per second. This means that in a reaction delay of barely half a second, more than 45 additional feet were covered before any maneuver began. The Mercedes was traveling in the left lane when a lateral contact occurred with a small white passenger car, later identified as a Fiat Uno. When the two vehicles brushed sideways, a transverse impulse appeared that altered the balance of the car. That impulse generated a small change in the vehicle's yaw angle, changing the orientation of the car relative to its trajectory. As the vehicle was already traveling near the limit of tire adhesion, that lateral destabilization initiated a progressive slide, causing the car to move slightly sideways relative to the direction of travel. In modern vehicles, electronic stability control could have detected that initial skid and corrected it by applying selective braking to the wheels. Unfortunately, in 1997, the Mercedes W140 in which the Princess of Wales Diana was traveling did not generally incorporate the system. After the contact with the Fiat, the driver applied the brakes forcefully. On the tunnel pavement, approximately 62 feet of initial braking marks were recorded. These marks indicated that the braking system was functioning correctly and that the driver attempted to reduce speed abruptly. However, during intense braking when the vehicle already presented a certain yaw angle, this could increase the level of instability. When the front wheels became partially locked and almost reached the limit of adhesion, their ability to generate lateral force decreased drastically, causing the Mercedes to lose the ability to correct direction. After that first impact with the Fiat Uno, the Mercedes continued moving for approximately another 40 additional feet. During that interval, new braking marks were observed, indicating that the driver was still attempting to stop the vehicle. But at that point, the trajectory was already uncontrollable. The car was partially rotated relative to the direction of travel, and the driver had very little lateral space available to recover control. The Mercedes veered toward the central divider and collided head-on with pillar number 13 of the tunnel. This meant that almost all of the car's kinetic energy had to be dissipated in the deformation of the vehicle itself and in the deceleration of its occupants. At a speed close to 65 miles per hour, the vehicle was carrying a kinetic energy of approximately 800 kilojoules. Therefore, at the moment of the impact against the pillar, that energy was released in a fraction of a second. The left front section of the Mercedes absorbed most of the impact, causing the entire assembly of the hood, the front subframe and the structural longitudinal members, to deform in a catastrophic and massive manner. The structural intrusion was very deep, reaching the point of pushing components of the engine bay toward the front passenger compartment. This type of deformation is characteristic of an impact against a narrow and rigid obstacle. In addition, the impact remained eccentric relative to the vehicle's center of mass. This generated a new rotational moment, causing the car to begin rotating rapidly while it continued moving inside the tunnel. After the main impact against the pillar, the Mercedes completed approximately a rotation close to 180 degrees. During that rotation, a new impact occurred against the right lateral wall of the tunnel. From a structural standpoint, the Mercedes passenger compartment largely maintained its integrity. The W140 platform was designed with a very rigid passenger cell, surrounded by deformation zones toward the front of the vehicle. The doors remained relatively intact, and the central safety cell did not completely collapse. This structural behavior explains how the bodyguard traveling in the front right seat survived, as he was the only one wearing a seatbelt. The situation for the rear passengers was very different. When an occupant was not restrained by a seat belt, the body continued moving within the passenger compartment, with the risk of suffering serious injuries when striking the interior of the vehicle. In the accident of Princess Diana, the initial deceleration occurred mainly in the frontal direction, but the rotation of the vehicle also added lateral and oblique components, so while the car was rotating, her body was striking multiple interior surfaces. The forensic analyses that were conducted indicated that Diana suffered an extremely severe internal injury to the pulmonary vein, caused by a strong deceleration of the torso against a rigid surface inside the vehicle. The hemorrhage caused a state of hemorrhagic shock and cardiac arrest, and although she was operated on at the hospital, the injuries were incompatible with life. The official investigation conducted by the authorities concluded that no mechanical failures existed in the automobile. The tunnel pavement was dry and in good condition, and no defects were detected in the tires or in the braking system. And with this, we reach the end of today's video. If you enjoy these analyses and reconstructions, and feel like giving me a hand to keep creating more content, you can leave a like and subscribe. That way, besides helping me, you'll also stay up to date with all the new uploads to the channel. Finally, before closing, I'd love to hear your opinion in the comments, and know whether you think the driver was solely responsible for the accident. Thank you very much for watching. I'll read your thoughts in the comment section, and I'll see you in the next video.